Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Asher Agency, a full-service marketing agency with offices in Indiana, West Virginia, and Washington, D.C. For nearly 50 years, Asher has helped our clients tell their stories, reach customers and prospects, and stand out from the crowd. To learn more about how we can help your company, visit asheragency.com or contact us at hello@asheragency.com. Our guest today is Megan Hubartt. Megan, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing great. So you are fairly new into your new job.
Yes.
How's that going?
It's going great. So I am working with Indiana Youth Institute on a brand new project called the Youth Worker Wellbeing Project.
Oh, wow.
So I am Director of Communications over that project. It just kind of hit the ground running a little bit last year. And in 2024, we're really kicking off a lot of the new programs that we're implementing for youth workers across the state of Indiana. So It's been a lot of fun.
Well, I am definitely interested in hearing more about that, and we will use that as our cliffhanger to keep people locked in. We won't talk about it yet, but we'll talk about it in a little bit. And I'd like to start, Megan, by how you got to where you are today, starting with your career path. I understand your original background was in journalism.
Yeah.
And there's somewhat of a family connection there, correct?
That's correct.
So what I'd like to hear about is, did you choose journalism because of that family connection? Despite that family connection, were you headed in a different direction and ended up choosing journalism, or did it choose you? How did all that start for you?
That's a great question. I think for me, so my dad was in newspapers his entire career. He started out as a sports reporter at the News Sentinel here in Fort Wayne and built his career there. I grew up in newspapers, right? So I kind of ran around the newsroom as a young child and kind of was definitely exposed to that environment. Probably the nicer sides of the environment, maybe. I'm sure it was an edited version for me. So my strengths were often in school in English and social sciences, history, things like that. So my interests were kind of in a lot of what builds journalism to begin with. And as I got to the point where it was, I got to pick a career, I knew a lot of what went on in the newsroom, and it kind of just ended up being a natural fit along with some of the strengths that I had. And did you go to school for journalism? I did, yeah. So I ended up graduating with my undergrad degree at IU in journalism and political science. Yeah. Okay, so then you dive into that world and you stay there for about a year? I have that right? I was about two and a half. Okay. I spent a little bit of time at the News Sentinel doing some reporting and copy editing, and then I crossed halls to the Journal-Gazette and kind of kicked off my career as a police reporter. Yep. So I was there a little less than 2 years, and it was a tough job. And it was kind of like, I know I don't want to do this the rest of my life, so I was ready, pretty quickly to move forward. Well, it's not a 9-to-5 job. Right. And it is really a passion for some people, but if it's not something that you see as a passion, it can be very taxing, especially if you're doing police reporting. Absolutely, yeah. So it was one of those things. I think I kind of knew at the end of my college career, newspaper journalism wasn't a passion of mine. Yeah. But because of a lot of the experience I had built up with internships and student newspaper and things like that, that's what my career started out in very easily. Yeah. It was one of those things where I was around a lot of people who are very passionate about it, and I didn't feel that way. Yeah, so it was like, I think I need to find another direction because I don't have that passion for it. Yeah, and sometimes you don't know until you do it, right? Right, exactly. That was part of my quest too, right? Yeah. Just figuring it out along the way. So let's talk about where you pivoted from there. What direction did you go into once you decided, hey, maybe this isn't for me? Yeah, so when in undergrad, I had taken a PR class, and the adjunct professor had been communications person in the nonprofit sector. Yep. So that had always kind of been swimming around in the back of my mind as an opportunity. Yeah. And when I left the paper, I was like, I think that's the direction I want to go. It was 2008, so the economy was crappy. And so I spent a little time doing technical writing and manufacturing as I was figuring out, okay, what are my next steps? I wanted to go on and get my master's degree. So I ended up going back to school to get my MPA, my master's in public administration. So I had a little bit of public nonprofit background. And while I was doing that, I ended up landing my first communications role in the nonprofit sector with Habitat for Humanity here in Fort Wayne. So that was a great opportunity for me, a great learning experience. It was the first time they'd ever had a communications person on staff. So I was able to build a lot there and also learn as I was going, right? So
you get to choose your own adventure, so to speak.
Exactly. I'm free to make some mistakes along the way, right? As we were learning together as a staff. So it was just such a great experience being able to kind of learn another side of communications, learn a lot about marketing that I'd never had any type of background in before, and do it in an organization that I was excited about and that I was proud of the mission and what we were doing in the community. So.
Well, and I would think in that role, you have some of the challenges that you sometimes have in nonprofits because the resources are put towards the end benefit of the organization, but you have the advantage of being a internationally recognized brand. So you have that going.
Oh my goodness, yes. Yeah. So that was one great advantage I had. Not having had any background in marketing, coming into an organization that had a really well-established brand, like you said, internationally, I didn't have to do some of that really grunt work of figuring out things like logos or brand colors or those types of things. That was all really well established at a international level, and so I had some of those tools right at the outset.
Yeah. So tell us where you went from there and why you decided to make a change, and then we'll talk about the very interesting next job that you took after that.
Actually, that was I was there for 7.5 years, so I did a lot of good work there. I was growing in my roles, took on grant writing and a lot of other things that happen when you're in a nonprofit sector. And but I was just really ready to kind of concentrate solely on communications and continue growing in my career. And I had an opportunity to go to the Department of Health here in Allen County. That was October of 2018. So I was coming in at a good time. I was excited to work with the health commissioner at the time. Was Dr. Deb McMahon. She was, a community leader and very visionary, and was just really excited to get into that really strategic communications. It was a lot more media relations being in a public agency like that. But yeah, so it was an exciting time for me to continue growing my career. Well, and the reason I say that was an interesting job is because of the time period in which you did that job included the pandemic. Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
What was that like being, the primary communications officer for the primary public entity that is kind of the voice of reason, if you will, during the pandemic?
Yeah, it was, I call it a, crash course in crisis communications for sure. A great experience because we had such a solid department, good leadership there. But I think like everyone who looks back at their time during the pandemic, some of it was just like, what the heck happened?
For sure.
You were just putting one foot in front of the other and doing the best you could. But I think overall, my experience there, the team that I got to work with, all of that was just such a positive experience and an kind of exciting experience in some ways in communications because I can remember Dr. McMahon saying, we're on the side of history, we don't know what's going to happen, but we're making history right now as we're working through this. So being a part of that team where that was the mentality early on, I think that was exciting for sure.
Well, and I don't know if this was consistent with your experience, but I've always said that the crisis communication work that we do here at Asher, it's some of the most difficult work we do, but it's some of the most meaningful because of what's at stake for clients, for the stakeholders that they serve, for in your case, the general public. So it can lead to a lot of late nights. It can lead to a lot of second guessing. But when you do it well, it tends to leave an impact.
Right, absolutely. And so I can look back at that time and feel really good about what we did. Did we always make the exactly right decisions? Probably not, because nobody knew what was going on.
Yeah, there was no template. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But we had some resources and some planning in place that we would have taken those steps no matter what, because we were in a pandemic and there were certain steps that you took in any kind of pandemic. But overall, I think, like you said, it was really, knowing that what we were doing was really in with the end goal in mind of helping the community and saving lives.
Yeah.
That's not too many times, I think, in your career you can really look at it that way. In a communications career, in my experience.
For sure. A lot of times the work can seem pretty superficial, mm-hmm. but when you're dealing with something of that magnitude, it makes it a little bit more fulfilling to get out of bed and do the job, even when that's hard to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So after the pandemic, you decided, hey, maybe it's time to do something else. And the through line with nonprofits continues to this day with your work at IYI. Do I have that right?
Yep,
okay,
absolutely.
Indiana Youth Institute.
Yep.
For some reason, I couldn't get the second letter in the acronym right. But tell us a little bit, Megan, what that organization is and what your role is.
Yeah, so Indiana Youth Institute is a support organization for youth serving nonprofits and other organizations throughout the state of Indiana. So they exist to build up and support organizations that are on the front line serving Hoosier youth. Mm-hmm. So this project that I'm working on as the Director of Communications for the Youth Worker Wellbeing Project is a new initiative that Indiana Youth Institute has partnered with several other youth-serving organizations throughout the state to really start investing and pouring into youth workers throughout Indiana.
Yep.
So I think the pandemic, one thing that we can look back on and see that came of it is that a lot of different professions found that they were just burnt out and that they had been stretched so thin through such a difficult time that they were leaving their professions. And youth workers are one of those areas where they're just burnt out in their work. They're invested in what they're doing, but they're not always being invested back into. And so the goal of this project is really to start pouring into the youth workers here in Indiana so that they can better serve the youth. And, there's this ripple effect then that comes from that, where if our youth workers are healthy and well and feel professionally invested in, then our youth throughout the state are going to benefit from those services that they're providing. So this project is funded by the Lilly Endowment, brand new, basically, and really got off the ground in late 2023. And we're kicking off several different programs of this project. So one of the biggest parts of it is we're doing now no-cost telemedicine and virtual mental health services for Indiana youth workers across the state of Indiana.
Oh, wow.
So for different youth-serving organizations that qualify, we're able to provide these services to all of their staff at no cost to the organization. And this is a supplement to, benefits that they might already have, or if they have part-time staff that don't qualify for benefits, it's another resource for those folks. And it's through a company called First Step Health, really easy telemedicine provider that you can just get on your phone, and if you need some, urgent care issues that you need to talk to a doctor or need to talk to a counselor, you set up an appointment. It's super easy. So we just launched this in January. We have almost 10,000 youth workers in Indiana who now have access to this service. Wow. So we're super excited about that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Well, and an example that comes to mind for me is a lot of mental health counseling that's done virtually is not covered by insurance. So this is a way of getting that benefit while being able to make it work with the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
Whether you have a family, full-time job, whatever it is.
Yep.
So, Megan, to help us understand, and when I say us, I'll start with me.
Yeah.
Some of the organizations you work with, some of these youth-serving organizations, can you give us some examples of organizations' names that the audience might recognize?
Absolutely. So Big Brothers Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Club, this YMCA, Youth for Christ, things of that nature. Folks who are, on the front lines working with young people. Yeah.
So I would assume that it's collaborative with those organizations. They're helping you identify the needs. They're seeing this as a welcome supplement to what they're trying to do to train and retain their staff.
Yep, absolutely. So there was a lot of thought and a lot of planning that was put into this project on the back end of things. With focus groups and interviewing youth workers about what their needs were, talking to organization leaders about, what they want to be able to provide and how they can retain their staff, but what they maybe are not able to. So a lot of that work that went on that back end to really get this project going forward.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to hear a little bit too, Megan, about the team you work with at IYI, because in nonprofits it can vary significantly, as you've experienced in your own career. Mm-hmm. How do you fit into the larger organization? Who you're working alongside? Is there a team of people who are working on communication? Is it just you? How does all that work at your organization?
That's a really good question. So IYI is a decent-sized nonprofit, about 50 staff members that are across the state of Indiana. I work specifically with the Youth Worker Wellbeing Project team, which we are a mighty team of 5. But I also we have a marketing and data communications department that I kind of connect with and work alongside as well. So I have that advantage of coming into an organization where there is an established marketing and communications department, a lot of branding resources that are available. We have a VP who oversees that department, and graphic designer, a senior communications manager, folks that I can work alongside and really help develop some of this new communications that we have around the new project. But then I oversee all of the Youth Worker Wellbeing Project's communications and marketing from my role. So it's definitely a team environment now.
Okay. And is it, while it's new, it's not starting today, is it mature enough that you're spending most of your time working with the youth serving organizations? Or are you still kind of defining what this work is going to be?
So the program is pretty well defined as a project, but we're still building out some pieces of it. So it's kind of gone in phases. We had the big launch of that telemedicine and virtual mental health. We've launched another portion of the program with peer support groups, where we're opening another opportunity for youth workers across the state to join these virtual peer support groups as another resource for their mental health and their professional development. And then we have a few other programs that we'll be launching later this year that kind of phase in different pieces of the Youth Worker Wellbeing Project. So it's come in phases for sure. I started off kind of focusing on that mental health program, and then phased into the peer support project, and then we're kind of moving down the line with all of the different programs that we're launching for youth workers throughout the state. And
it's truly statewide. So whether you're in Evansville, Fort Wayne, Gary, whatever the other corner of the state is, Aurora, Lawrenceburg, yes, so it's equally as available to anyone. If there's someone who's listening to this who works for a youth-serving organization and they feel like they could benefit, how would they get connected to it? Does it have to be through their employer, or can they come directly to IYI?
That's a good question. So I would recommend going to our website. Youthworkerwellbeing.org is our URL for our program. IYI.org will also get them there. And it depends. So something like the peer support group is something where any individual youth worker, if they feel like they need an extra boost, they need connection to their peers, they need a little support and tools to work through challenges that they're facing in their role, they can get into those groups at any time. They don't have to do it through their organization. A program like the telemedicine and mental health, we are enrolling organizations as those organizations. So that's a little bit different of a piece. So it really depends on what they're interested in. So I'd ask them to check out the website, and then we also have an email that they can connect to us directly there if they have additional questions.
Well, that's great. It's nice to know that some of the services are available even for those who may be at very small organizations that aren't otherwise connected. Awesome. Yes. And Megan, in addition to the work you do at IYI, you've stayed connected to nonprofits as a volunteer, because you and I served together on the Fort Wayne Trails Board. What else have you done or are you doing on the nonprofit sector as a volunteer, or is it pretty much Fort Wayne Trails for now?
Right now it's Fort Wayne Trails. I really got into the idea of board engagement and getting involved in the community. I had spent some time at the Allen County Public Library and their nonprofit resource center. We had a project going there called Get On Board, where we were really trying to engage young people in board engagement throughout the community. And we would hold these events where we did like speed dating with nonprofit organizations and young people interested in getting involved. And so that was a time where I was like really excited about getting into the community and getting involved in board service. I also spent some time as a board intern with the Fort Wayne Museum of Art. So I got a chance to do that for about a year and got a little more experience learning what it was like to be a board member directly. So I've taken opportunities when I've had the chance to volunteer where I can and get involved in different ways in the community.
Well, that's great. That's great that as someone who has a full-time job with a nonprofit, you still finding time to volunteer and give back in another way.
Well, there's so many opportunities, and it's such a great way too to learn about the different ways that marketing communications plays a role in the community, and just learn about the other ways that organizations need to operate in order to do the services that they provide.
Well, and there's always, it's true, I think, for every nonprofit. You can always use a perspective from the outside looking in, because sometimes, Trails, just as an example, has really highly competent staff, but they can't do it all. They can't see it all. And it's easy to get myopic about what you do because you do it every day. And to get input from individuals who are fairly new to the organization, because I think you've been on the board for less than a year now.
Yep.
Probably more valuable than what I bring, having been there 8 years, because you almost know too much at that point.
Yeah,
so that's great.
Yeah, it's always good to have that diversity of perspectives. For
sure. Well, let's pivot to a few of the quick hit questions that I like to ask our guests. And the first one has to do with your career path, Megan. What is your best career advice? You've done some things that maybe didn't work out as you expected, and you moved on to different things. Now you're doing something that you're really passionate about. There's a through line with nonprofit work that speaks to a heart for service. But what's your best piece of career advice coming out of all of that? If you were talking to someone who's maybe just getting started and they were thinking about how do they make this work? How do they ultimately find success and fulfillment at work? What would you say that comes down to for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, it's especially early on is saying yes a lot of times. I think we always have to find a good balance, right? But I think early on in my career, it was really taking the opportunities that were given or that opened up to me, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? You definitely don't know what you don't know. And so just getting into things, trying it out. If it doesn't work out, especially when you're young, it's not too hard to pivot and shift and go a different direction. So
for sure.
Yeah. So I think for me, that would be for someone really just breaking into it, say yes more than saying no.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's really great advice. I share this example all the time, but I really didn't start my marketing career until her name is Karen Manis. She worked at Parkview. She took a shot on me as a marketer when I was almost 30 years old. And I was, at that point, 5 or 6 years into my career. And it was because someone took a chance on me, and because I had made some stops and starts and, some false starts along the way. If I had given up after the first false start, I wouldn't have gotten very far.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think part of what you're saying too that resonates with me is, especially when you're younger in your career, to say yes to opportunities that maybe you think you're not ready for. Because if somebody else sees the potential of you doing it, maybe you trust them and say, maybe they see something here and it's worth a shot.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. I think, when I think back about, my time starting out in Habitat, I had no marketing experience whatsoever. I really didn't know the first thing about it.
Yeah.
But because of the little experience that I did have, somebody saw potential in it, and, we're willing to kind of take that chance, right? And what a great, it was such a great door opener for me. So I definitely see that as an advantage. If, a lot of times people see things in us that we don't begin to see in ourselves. So
well, and a lot of times you don't know until you actually do it. I remember that job that I mentioned, the first day of work, I took a PageMaker 6.5 class. For those in the design world, that will date me pretty quickly. But, I had never done graphic design before, and probably, wasn't qualified to do it well even after I took that class. But it was learning a new skill and taking a risk and saying, okay, I don't know this, but I'm probably better served having a little bit of this in my toolkit than not.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's just being able to also, like you said, acknowledge what you don't know, right? And being okay and being, kind of leaning into the fact that maybe that you definitely don't know it all. But if you're willing to learn and you're willing to take on, new responsibilities and learn new skills, that you're probably going to find yourself in a much better position down the road.
100%. 100%. Great advice. All right. Second quick hit question. What is a myth or misconception about your work? That could be a myth or misconception about IYI. It could be about the world of nonprofits. It could be about the world of PR and communication. Something that you would like to clear up. And maybe it's amplifying something that's not well respected enough or debunking a myth that's just not true.
That is a good question. That's a tough one too. One thing that I've encountered a bit in my time in communications and marketing is I think a lot of people on the outside see it as either a magic bullet or the root cause of all of their problems. Mm-hmm. And so, I would encourage folks to not always want to look at marketing communications as either. Mm-hmm. It's definitely an important tool, and in any organization's health and in their strategy and in their success, you need a solid marketing and communications plan there. Yeah. But it's also not going to be your magic bullet when things aren't going well. So I think I encountered that a lot. A lot of people who are looking to, we just need a billboard, or we just need more social media, or, we just need this one thing and then things will go better. And it's usually a little more complicated than that.
Yeah. Well, and, the key to success in the marketing world is have a great product or service. Right. And the marketing will kind of take care of itself. Right. I don't want to oversimplify, but there's some truth in that. Yeah. So I think you're dead on that it certainly is a benefit to have skilled marketing communication folks on your team, but they can't do it on their own. Yeah. For sure. Yep. Especially in a world where the one thing I think that is maybe one of my biggest pet peeves is that you can't create stuff out of nowhere. You need the support and the information from the subject matter experts to feed that never-ending need for content and for stories. Yep. I've worked with countless organizations over the years, and they all have great stories to tell, but precious few have done a good job of harnessing those stories. Mm-hmm. So it's really about making sure that everybody believes and knows you're part of the marketing team. You can help us do our job more effectively if you give us the right information. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's definitely been my experience as well, is that I've been most successful in my job when I've had environment around me where people are constantly sharing those stories and that content and that information. It's always been much harder in my roles, excuse me, when I feel like I'm on an island, right? Yeah, and nobody's talking to the communications person. For sure. All right. So we have made our plea to the non-communication marketing people of the world to be more forthcoming with stories and information. Absolutely. All right. Last quick hit question has to do with the tools you use at work. Is there a trick or a tip or a hack or a shortcut or an app or whatever it is that you use? Doesn't have to be an app. It could be analog. Something you use that helps you get the job done that you think is worth a mention. Yeah. Can I pick two? Absolutely. I'm going to pick my analog first, just for the old school folks. I love scrap pieces of paper that I turn into my to-do list. Okay. Yeah. And it is a bullet pointed to-do that I just check off the list. So that's my little analog. So let me follow up on that with a devil's advocate question, right? We have all these great apps. I'm a big fan of Todoist, which is an app that is really about tasks, right? Why do you use pen and paper versus a technology solution for that to-do list making and tracking? That's a good question. I think part of it's just so it sticks in my brain a little more. So, I think there's been a lot of studies on how when you write something down, that your brain actually remembers it a little better than if you're typing or thumbing it into your phone. So for me, it's a stick to my brain thing too. And I'm a old school print, journalist, reporter with a notebook type person. So I just really got into the habit early on of writing notes. And so that's just for me the best way to keep things organized. No, I think that's good. And another benefit that I've found is that while I very much probably have a bias toward technology solutions, sometimes it can be like, okay, I need to add this to my to-do list. Let me go to my phone and go to Todoist. Oh, wait, there's a notification. 50 minutes later, I'm on, the Taylor Swift Spotify page. I don't know how I got there. All I know is I lost 45 minutes, right? And I don't remember what it is that I went to the phone for. Yeah. So there's that, the never-ending draw of the rabbit hole. Yes, so we are so very distracted these days. 100%. So I am a little bit of an advocate for
fewer distractions in your life.
So pen and paper it is. Pen and paper it is. All right. But you also had a non-analog tool?
I did. So from that nonprofit public background where, sometimes you have very little or no marketing budget at all.
Yeah.
Finding free tools out there is
for sure
a great advantage, right?
Yeah.
So early on, I didn't have it at Habitat, but when I was with the health department, became aware of Canva, and man, that was a great tool for me. I'd worked in Adobe Creative Suite with Habitat, and learned a lot of basic, like you had talked about your basic graphic design skills.
Yeah.
I learned some of that there, but Canva was like, wow, all of these templates and tools and resources to make things look pretty nice, without having the money to do it. So that, if you're, particularly for my nonprofit friends out there, if they have very little budget, not a lot of graphic design experience, and are looking to make things look a little more polished, that's a great tool available to them.
I think that's a great recommendation, and others have mentioned that as well, but I think it is still underappreciated. A lot of my designer friends really don't like Canva.
Of course they don't. Understandably.
But I am really astounded at the need that it fills, because it is lower cost. It is much more user-friendly. I mean, when I mentioned PageMaker 6.5 and the basics, even the basics were a foreign language to me.
Yeah.
It's like, you got to pull down the window shade. I'm like, what are you talking about? But Canva, I think, has really done a great job of filling that need for if you are not a trained graphic designer, but you want it to look good. And I think it's really a reflection of how the content engine has changed.
Yes.
When I started my career, your need for content was relatively rare. You had time. It was higher production values, more time. Now it's like every day you're creating content. Some of it needs to be really good and high production values. Other stuff just needs to get out the door.
Yes.
And I think Canva can do the higher end stuff in some cases really well, but it's great for the things that are more production, need to get it done, need to get some content out there. The social media beast is screaming at me.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely my experience. Yeah, it's really just kind of digging in and filling in those gaps where, I don't have a graphic designer to do the nice things or a videographer to put something really, really polished together for me. So
yeah, as you mentioned, I think especially useful in the nonprofit world, but even for those who are not, some value in Canva.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So, Megan, one more time, if people want to learn more about the initiative you're working on, where can they find that online?
Yeah, Youth Worker Wellbeing, all one word, .org, IYI.org. It'll be there as well. That's a little easier for folks.
So whether you want to type in 6 characters or more than that, that's up to you.
Yes.
All right. Well, Megan, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Anthony.
And thanks to everyone who took the opportunity to listen to this episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. We'll be back next time with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.